I'm Danny West. You are watching another episode of the Soapbox, your patient education station. And this week in our physio class, so with Indepth Physio teaching this class at Embody Pilates, the theme of the week was the foot. In particular, the hot topic this week was bunions, okay? So I just find that bunions are very easily preventable. And the unfortunate part is, I know a lot of the surgeons, when they do a bunion surgery, I know a lot of them don't give a whole lot of patient education on why did the bunion happen in the first place, and how can we prevent another bunion from happening, because the surgery isn't going to prevent it, it's just going to fix what's already existed for years and years. So we're going to talk about the big toe today and some easy things you can do to prevent bunions. This isn't just for the older population. I had a dancer about a month ago came to see me for pre-point work, and she had bunion surgery already at 14. So pretty crazy. This can happen at any age, and like I said, the earlier you can start implementing some of these techniques, the better, so that you don't have to end up with bunion surgery. That's kind of last resort, worst case scenario. We like to prevent things here at Indepth Physio through patient education. So without further ado, we're going to just do a quick little bout of anatomy here. So we have, starting at the top, we have our shin bone, our tibia, and our fibula. They sit on a little platform of our ankle bone called the talus, okay, and they kind of slide and glide on top of that little platform in a perfect world. Under the talus, we have the fancy name for the heel bone called the calcaneus, and then on the inside, we have what's called the navicular. The outside of the foot, our cuboid. These little guys in through the middle, they're called our cuneiforms. We have our metatarsals, which is the long bone portion of our toes. And then it goes into our little extremities here, kind of my favorite word, phalanges, okay? Each of them has 3 phalanges, except the big toe only has 2. And again, we're gonna focus more on the big toe today because that's kind of the culprit or the joint that gets affected. In particular, this one between our metatarsal and our phalange, our MTP joint, our metatarsal phalangeal joint. That's what gets really affected and cranky when kind of a bunion might be starting to come on. So number one thing we can fix is gait, how we walk. So the big toe is actually very important with proper gait. As you kind of weight bear, you should be toeing off the big toe straight on, and ideally you get almost like 80 to 90 degrees of extension through that joint. Not so much in my model here, but hopefully you have better extension than my little skeleton foot. So again, you should toe off rather straight. It should toe off, again, have enough range, 90 degrees of range as you push off. So what can happen if we have some funky walking patterns? The most common one that I see is walking like a duck. So again, if you start to walk with your feet turned out, which is common, particularly in dancers, but also just regular people, if you kind of notice people's foot patterns walking down the street, a lot of them are turned out. We can have a little bit of turnout, but we don't want to be like, totally look like a ballerina. So as we're toeing off now, if we're walking turned out, do you see how it's now torquing? Not twerking. It's torquing that big toe off on an angle. Think about how many steps you take in a day. You should all know now that we all have Fitbits and Garmin's to tell us our steps. Minimum 15,000 to 20,000 steps a day if you're reaching your goals. So that's like 20,000 times that you're kind of going over that big toe joint off kilter. Not the way it was designed to bend. So we can easily fix walking just by like having some awareness, or are my toes relatively forward? If you're a kid, fix this early, because when you're an adult, if you've been walking like this all your life, it's going to be really hard to correct it. So again, take it with a grain of salt. You're probably not going to be able to go parallel if you've been walking like this all your life, but maybe try to see if you could coax your walking or your steps so so that they're not totally in a V. Maybe think of a lessened V, again, to make sure that big toe joint works effectively. So a little test you can do is A, look how you're walking, look how other people are walking. Stop walking like a duck. Second thing, you can actually test how your big toe feels. So if you kind of pull it up, again, we should be getting close to 90 degrees, 80 is ideal, but it should have a nice kind of bend to it, okay? And again, just kind of notice, is that painful when you kind of pull up on it? You don't have to force anything, but check both sides, because you will have one side that's kind of stiffer than the other. The other thing you can kind of test in yourself is how you're doing calf raises or rises, as we would call them in dance. So if I demo it, just is seated here, okay? So as I rise up on the balls of my feet, my ankles should be tracking nice and straight. But if my big toe is stiff, what you're actually gonna see is what we call in dance a sickle, otherwise poor alignment for the regular Joe. Okay, so again, if that big toe can't bend fully and give me that position, the body takes the path of least resistance and it's gonna start to throw off our alignment off kilter. So quite often, if people's ankles look like they're winging out to the side, what do? I check the number one culprit, which can be the big toe, okay? Not to say there's not stuff going on in through the ankle, but I just, again, always check the big toe. So what can we do if we're starting to see a bit of a bunion? And again, I'll just kind of walk you through. What would a bunion look like? And I actually am starting to get one just from previous years of poorly fitting shoes and walking like a duck. So if I line up kind of along midline here, you'll see that it's more pronounced on my right. My big toe's veering away from midline, same with my left toe. Ideally, for proper alignment, we should have them relatively in a straight line, just when we're relaxed. But do you see how, again, I'm getting this pronounced kind of bony protuberance, and again, it actually looks worse on my left than my right. That's what we call a bunion. And that can get really bad and really pronounced. So this will get bigger and bigger. My toe, if I continue to walk like a duck and not correct anything, not strengthen, it'll keep going out to the side. And I've seen some pretty extreme poor big toe alignments that again will just predispose us to a worsening bunion. So a couple things we can do. Get your sweatband on, because these are like pretty intense big toe exercises. So I would have the patient see, can they just start to bring their big toes towards midline? So that is working a very important skill, a little muscle in and along the big toe. Its one main job is to move the toe, keep it in alignment, move it to midline. And that will be very hard for some people, so much so that they might not be able to actually do it voluntarily. They might have to position it with their own finger, and now we see if we can just hold it there. And then if they relax, it'll kind of veer off to the side. So again, start to practice bringing your big toe to midline, and then relaxing, and then eventually see if you can start to do it without help. Again, watch this is coming purely from the big toe and not just cheating from the ankles, okay? Second thing is, how does our big toe push down? Okay, so can we start to push the big toe down and lift the other toes up? And then the other thing is, can we keep the toes down, this one I'm not as good at, and lift the big toes up and see if we can hold it. And then swap, and then swap. And like I said, this one's tricky for me. We'll have one way that's easier than the other. It's called toe swapping. It's very important in strengthening that big toe as well as the little muscles of the arch. Okay, so that's our second exercise. The other thing that's really cool is in Pilates, we have these little doohickeys called toe correctors. How convenient if we are struggling or trying to prevent bunions. So you basically hook them on the big toe. They have a little spring in the middle. This one's a lighter spring than this one is a little bit of a heavier spring. I kind of stay seated. My knees are at 90 degrees. I make sure they're cinched right into the base of the big toe. And I'm going to start to pivot from my heels, keeping my heels planted. And I just start to work the toes out and in. And notice that it's kind of nice, it's starting to pull my toes out more towards midline, out in alignment. I could do one at a time. Again, just from this stabilizing, it's starting to pull it more towards midline. And I could also do the other one. Now, these things, any Pilates equipment is usually ridiculously expensive in this day and age. So, spoiler alert, here's a super expensive way to mimic this, is take a TheraBand and you make 2 loops in either side. I have a little space in the middle, again, to mimic this toe corrector. So I'm gonna hook this on the big toe. And voila, it's my own homemade toe corrector. Okay, and again, I can do 2 at once. This is also great to start rotating the shin bone, getting some mobility there. Or I can do the 1 at a time. Sets of 10 to 15. And again, this is great to try to promote that proper alignment of the big toe. Just watch that the knees aren't kind of winging open and closed. You can't see it on the video, but I'm holding my knees in place as I pivot from the heel, okay? So again, those are 3 really great exercises you can do for the big toe. If you have bunions or you're worried about your bunions getting worse, those are 3 great ones to start with and start working that big toe, because it's one of the most important parts of your foot and it gets a little forgotten about. So no duck walking, strengthen that big toe and make your own little toe corrector. Thanks guys, we'll see you next week when we continue our topic of arch strengthening for the foot. Thanks.